Good evening. My name is Darren Reesberg. I'm the Executive Director of the Institute of Politics here at the University of Chicago, and on behalf of our Institute Director, David Axelrod, and the rest of the Institute of Politics team, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. There could not be a more perfect way to culminate our first year of programming than with Nobel Peace Prize winner, Professor Elie Wiesel. And there could not be a more perfect location for us to host our esteemed guest than here at the university's wonderfully spiritual Rockefeller Chapel. I want to thank Dean Elizabeth Davenport and her great team at Rockefeller for their partnership in this event. As most of you out there know, the Institute of Politics is a nonpartisan extracurricular program aiming to instill and nurture in UChicago students a passion for politics and public service. It is the vision of David, who found a university president and administration who shared and has generously supported that vision. We are now 1 year in, and through David's leadership, a committed team, and a whip-smart, eager, tireless, and fun, yes, fun, student body, we have taken a major step towards realizing that vision. It's sad, in some ways, to see this year end knowing that our fourth-year students will be leaving the nest, but the beauty of an institute at a university is that we know the nest will be filled. In fact, just a few weeks ago, right here at Rockefeller Chapel, 500 newly admitted students came to hear David speak about the institute, surrounding him afterwards, expressing their excitement about participating in the institute's programming when they arrive on campus next fall. So we have a lot to look forward to, including tonight's event. Tonight, David will have a conversation with Professor Wiesel, and then pose questions that have come in through email, Facebook, and Twitter by all of you. While I recognize this probably goes without saying, robust but civil discourse is a University of Chicago fundamental, so we ask for your help in supporting those values while listening to the conversation and the questions and answers that follow. And on a lighter note, we encourage you to follow us on Twitter at UChiPolitics, UCHI Politics, and live tweet using the hashtag Wiesel UChicago, WIESEL UChicago. As is the case with all of our events, our student ambassadors were integral to the planning and execution, so thanks to all of you. And a special thank you to tonight's student event chairs, Johnny Behrens, Mosam Shah, and the gentleman behind me, Eric Wesson, who in a moment will introduce our participants. Eric is a third year here at the college, who I had the good fortune of meeting soon after I arrived on campus last year. As the Institute was getting up and running, we thought it would be fun to have an event around the first presidential debate. Sorry, David. And to precede the viewing of that debate, both with the discussion of debate history by our friend Newt Minow and a mock debate with student participants. Before we had really even conceived of the student debate idea, Eric somehow had already volunteered. Remember, I said these students are very, very eager. Eric was one of the 4 student debaters, and he and his debate partner represented the platform of Governor Romney. They performed magnificently. The Logan Center Auditorium was full the entire evening, and the event further established the Institute of Politics' presence here on campus. Since then, Eric's involvement in the Institute has only grown, in addition to serving as president of the Chicago Model United Nations, Speaker of the House of the University Chicago Political Union, Chairman of the Conservative Federation, and a member of the UChicago Republicans. Eric serves on the Institute of Politics Student Advisory Council. This summer, Eric will be participating in the Institute of Politics internship program, working in Washington, D.C. in the policy department of the Republican Governors Association. Please join me in welcoming Eric Wesson to introduce our guests.
Thank you so much, Darren. On behalf of the Student Advisory Council at the University of Chicago, and hopefully the student body and community as a whole, we appreciate everything you and your staff have done this year. And thank you, David Axelrod. As the director of the Institute of Politics, you've brought to the University of Chicago an incredible mix of politicians, reporters, and thinkers that have given us many points of view and helped us to see beyond the headlines. Without the institute that you have started, this university would have nowhere near the level of discourse concerning the ultimate human art of politics. Perhaps most relevantly, we are extremely appreciative of you bringing this awe-inspiring guest here tonight. When originally starting to write this introduction, I had no idea where to start because the man I'm introducing holds such a unique place in history. When discussing the Holocaust, the murder of millions in Europe, there are two works that are read by people, by school children, all around the country and all around the world. One of these is Night, a truly amazing book that brings the harsh realities of this horrible moment in the history of humanity to millions. Due to his work on atrocity prevention and to bring to light the true horrors capable by humans in order to prevent them, Dr. Elie Wiesel was called by the Nobel Committee a messenger to mankind. Dr. Wiesel grew up in Siget, a town at first in Romania and then Hungary. During World War II, he was sent to Auschwitz, a death camp that served as a murder factory, killing more than 1.3 million people. These atrocities committed around Wiesel showed him the depths of the dark side of humanity, but he managed to maintain his optimism. The work that he has done with regard to understanding the human condition is unparalleled, and his prodigious writing career has been matched only by his passion for teaching, as he has taught at Boston University and around the world for more than 40 years. Earlier today, I had the distinct honor of attending a small conversation at the Institute of Politics House, where a group of students got to listen and ask questions to Dr. Wiesel. And it was one of the most powerful experiences at my time here at the University of Chicago. Professor Elie Wiesel, a Nobel Peace Prize winner, has taken it upon himself to engage the world, to work towards enlightening the unenlightened, and teaching us about ourselves through example. It is my great honor and pleasure to introduce you to Elie Wiesel.
Thanks, Eric and Darren. I can attest, Professor Wiesel, that this is not the normal turnout for our events. We do well, but not this well, and it's a tribute to you that this beautiful chapel is filled tonight. I must tell you that there are a lot of privileges that accrue to one when you work for the President of the United States, but one of them is that you get to meet the most extraordinary people. But there is no friendship, no relationship, no meeting that I relished more than mine with Professor Wiesel. We first met at the inauguration in 2008, a chance meeting in a hallway, and we had a great conversation. But then I had a chance to accompany him and the president to Buchenwald. And it was an extraordinary trip together, moving trip. I do remember on the flight in, I said to you, and I don't know if you remember this, I said, think about the way you first arrived at Buchenwald and now you're flying back on Marine One with the President of the United States who's a black man. And I said, history has a sense of justice, and you said, I don't know if it has a sense of justice, but it certainly has a sense of humor. But I also remember on that visit, Chancellor Merkel was there and the German authorities were there, and someone asked you how you could stand on the same platform because you spoke, and very movingly there, and you said, the children of murderers are not murderers. And we had a bit of this discussion earlier today, but I want to ask you how one goes through the experience you went through, and where do you find that in your heart to react in that way? Where do you find forgiveness? How do you not allow yourself to be consumed by the hatred that you fought, and how do you keep from descending into despair?
Hatred, it may be strange. I really don't think I've ever hated, because the seduction must have been there to hate the enemy, to hate the killers. But somehow I was spared. I would fight them. I'm ready to fight them to this day. But without hatred. Hatred is contagious. Once you start, it doesn't stop. And you become its tool rather than the opposite. I am a Jew who believes in the Bible, Holy Scriptures and so forth. And you know, the hatred in the Bible exists always as a negative. Thou shalt not hate. And it says even, thou shalt not hate in your heart. And my question is it possible therefore to hate not in my heart? But that's what it says. It should not. Why? Because then you can hide it. You can actually hide hatred in your heart, and the other person doesn't even know about it. So therefore the biblical text says, don't hate in your heart. And hatred, what would I do with hatred? I don't think that hatred has produced great works of art. I don't know one. On the contrary, wherever there was hatred, like in Hitler's Germany, show me one great work of art that was written or produced in Germany under Hitler. So, if it's a temptation, I was never really seduced by it.
But you can see that a lot of people do succumb to that temptation.
Because it's easy. Once you choose hatred as an option or as a response, it's so easy to hate, really. But then you hate this or that, this person, other person. It's too easy an answer. I am not even to say, look, love thy neighbor. This, I don't go that far. But I would simply say, don't hate, because what for? If the hatred hates, and therefore the hatred becomes self-hatred, ultimately.
I want to mix some of the questions that we've received. We received questions online through email and Facebook and Twitter. And I want to mix some of these questions into our conversation. And Michelle Hoskins sent a question on Facebook and said, I just finished Night 2 days ago. I feel so honored that after reading his book, I find out Mr. Wiesel is speaking at the University of Chicago. If I could ask him one question, after being liberated, what kind of road did you take towards physical and mental recovery? And what sort of struggles do you still face even today?
Well, when I was liberated, first I fell ill. So I was actually in the hospital for a few weeks. Then I was taken to France by the OSE. OSE was still is actually an organization in France that takes care of Jewish orphans. And they took us. I came to France. I didn't speak a word of French. 2 years later, I began writing in French. My language at home was Yiddish. I studied Hebrew because my father insisted I should study modern Hebrew as well. But French, the only French words, I found them in the Rashi commentary. Rashi was a great commentator in France. I knew a few words from Rashi, but I didn't know French. Who would have guessed? I wouldn't. That one day it will become my tool. All my books, except Night, all of them, were written in French. Who knows?
But just in terms of the sort of psychic impact of the experience, presumably your writing was a catharsis of sorts. But there are others, Primo Levi. I remember the conversation that you had with the president about this, and you were talking about his works on the Holocaust, and you talked about the end of his life. He took his own life years later, and you said he died in the camps. It just took a while to catch up with him. What did you mean by that?
I knew Primo Levi very well. We met by accident at some conference in Italy. And when we compared notes, we realized that we were in the same barrack, literally in the same barrack, except he was an important person. He was a chemist. I was not. I was nothing. So we compared notes. And after the war, really, we became very good friends, close friends. A lot of letters, exchanges, and so forth. When he committed suicide, I was shocked but not surprised. Because a week earlier, he called me. And we used to speak on the telephone a lot. And all of a sudden, I felt that something is wrong in his voice. And I said to him, Primo, I'm going to hang up, and you hang up. Go to the airport. An air ticket will wait for you there. You come to New York, and I'm going to cancel all my commitments for next week. And you and I will go somewhere alone for a whole week. Long silence, and then he said, it's too late. When you hear these two words, you know tragedy will follow.
And what did you have that helped sustain you that he didn't have?
Remember I was younger than he. He was a chemist in the same camp that I was, but he was a chemist, he was respected. I think he was never hungry. I was. But what I had, I don't know what I had. But one thing I do know that I come from a tradition where suicide is not an option. Just not an option. A person who commits suicide in despair wins. Why should I allow anything or anyone to win such a battle? So that was not an option. The option was really anger, depression, but never going to suicide. Although I have written one of my books about suicide, thinking maybe I will understand why. I remember once in my university, I gave a course for a whole year about suicide and literature. Both books that deal with suicide, that the protagonist committed suicide, or where the writers have committed suicide. So many of them. Of all the categories of human endeavor, the writers had a majority to commit suicide. Why not painters, musicians, writers? And I think it's because they realized that language itself was victimized. The words will not say what I want them to say. And therefore, I almost understood that for the poet, the writer could say, if words mean nothing, then why live?
You're saying because it couldn't capture the depth of feeling that they were experiencing, or?
The depth of the event, of the experience. I feel it, I think many of my colleagues feel it to this day. Mm-hmm. Look, we have written, we bear witness, but I am not sure. To this day, I am not sure whether the words that I use did really communicate what I wanted to communicate. Because whatever happened then was beyond. And there the enemy had a kind of evil victory. He pushed his evil deeds beyond language. And in one of my books, the officer, an SS officer, says to his victim, one day you will talk, but nobody will believe you. You think you have the truth. They will laugh at you.
You mentioned earlier faith, and you've referenced the traditions in which you were raised. When we met with the young people earlier, there were a number of questions about that, and we got a number of questions over the internet on this, and a lot of questions about the journey your faith has taken. There was some incredulity about how one could continue to believe in the face of the inhumanity that you saw. Can you address that?
David, it's a very good and strong and powerful question. Where was God? Naturally, where was God in all that? I don't have the answer. But what I do know is that it shouldn't stay there. Was God in the camps? Was God a victim together with all of us, with his creation? A victim? He surely couldn't be on the side of the murderer. I cannot conceive of God, any God. Surely not the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Israel. I cannot conceive of God to be on the side of the killer. So where was he? If you think I know, I don't.
I was hanging on your answer there.
But I'll tell you, one thing I do know, that to accuse God, we may. God can take it. But why not about humanity? Where was man in all that? The day I discovered that among the arch killers of the Einsatzkommandos, there were aristocrats, von this and von that, and with doctorates. Among the worst killers were people, men, occasionally women, who had doctorates in philosophy or in chemistry, many doctorates. How could they, my God, who could they? How could they study in the morning Goethe and Schopenhauer, and in the afternoon go and kill with machine guns, not gas chambers, with machine guns, kill children and their parents and their grandparents, and then go home and have dinner? In other words, I could have then given up on humanity and to say, if this is humanity, go to hell. If this is culture, I don't want it. But that's not the answer. That's the question. And so therefore, what I try to do is to find the other side. Yes, I have the right to ask these questions. I even have the right to indict God himself. But not to stop there. But the next day, you go and you pray, because I prayed all my life. My grandfather was pious, my father was pious. And if we could pray inside those places, that's the only thing we knew. How could I not afterwards?
So faith was a sustaining, in the end of the day, despite all these questions, was a sustaining force in your life as well.
No. I would lie to you if it was easy to say yes. No. I don't know what sustained me, David. I swear to you, I don't know. I was the wrong candidate for survival. I was always sick. Age 7, my parents would take me from one doctor to another. I discovered big cities in Hungary because we went to doctors. We didn't have the proper doctors in my little town. So I was always sick. And in truth, I can tell you, I have never done anything in Auschwitz or Buchenwald in order to survive. As long as my father was alive, I wanted to live. So I knew if I die, he would die. After he died, I let myself live. I didn't do anything to go on living. It just came. And then one day, the American army came to Buchenwald and liberated us, and that's how I am here.
The reason one of the reasons I wanted to ask you about this is that faith is obviously a important and positive part of your life. It provides an ethical construct by which you've lived. But we see cases of people all over the world and here in the United States committing crimes in the name of religion, claiming to be acting in the name of God. We were just speaking before about the death of Yitzhak Rabin, which to me was one of the most horrific and destructive acts in the history of mankind, committed by a Jew who said that he was acting in the name of God. These alleged bombers in Boston acting, they say, to avenge the death of Muslims in the name of God. How is it that people can have such radically different ideas of what faith leads you to say that we shouldn't hate? Faith leads them to kill. How do we reconcile all of this?
Oh, we don't really. I think nothing would justify murder in general, but such murder surely. Nothing justifies that. What happened to this Yigal Amir, I think was his name, who killed Rabin? There was no reason for that. Absolutely no reason. Why? I don't know why. Did he know why he wanted to kill? Because he was afraid that Rabin will give up too much. Strangely enough, I was very close to Rabin. And 2 weeks earlier, Rabin was in America. And I remember it was a Shabbat, Saturday. And we met. And he was going next Monday to Boston to speak at the convention of the federations. He said, what should I speak about? I don't know why, but I said, speak about fanaticism. Just like that. The fanatic killed him. But I will never forget it. I was home, the telephone rang, somebody called me from Israel, saying, I'm just watching television and I heard a shot. A few minutes later, it's Rabin. Another minute, he's dead. I remained with the receiver in my hand. I couldn't put it down. The next day I decided to go there for the funeral. Why? Why? Why murder? I don't know.
Are you, is it your sense that, that the interplay between extremism and fundamentalism is rising, that there is that a growing threat? As you talk about fanaticism, we've seen an awful lot of death of late by people who claim to be acting on their faith. Is that a growing concern for you?
Terribly, of course. But not only in the Jewish religion, in other religions as well. Why the religions should produce fanaticism is beyond me. But they do, including our own. Although I believe everything in the Jewish religion, which is mine, is against it. It's against murder. The 10 Commandments is thou shalt not murder. Just simply, don't do that, no matter what. Thou shalt not commit murder. And here some people, some individuals decide they take the law in their hand and they feel they may and they do. And how can one stop that? How can you stop an individual? It's an individual who misinterprets all that he or anyone had learned from holy scriptures, from the biblical scriptures, and goes to kill. It disturbs terribly. Does it mean that the books that he had read were all wrong? But this young man, Yigal Amir, was a religious boy, which means every morning he would get up and pray to God and wear the tefillin. And it ended in murder. I read a lot about him, even in jail. He never regretted his act.
Right.
He was in jail. He never regretted his act.
Are you concerned that Islamic extremism will encourage a reaction among Jews in the Middle East and in Israel?
So I don't think that Yigal Amir had something to do with Islam or nothing. He wanted to kill Rabin because he felt Rabin was going to give in or give up too much. Almost not politics, just stupidity.
But in the larger, we see this growing trend toward extremism. Some of it fomented, as you saw in Boston, by things that are on the internet and efforts to radicalize. Are we in sort of a cycle of violence?
Whatever is extreme is destructive. In any religion and in any culture, whatever is extreme is destructive.
You know, earlier when I mentioned what you said about the children of murderers are not murderers, you talked earlier when we met with the students about that you don't believe in collective guilt. Mm-hmm. We have millions of Muslim Americans who are pillars of our community, who practice their faith in the way that you practice yours, and yet they are now, since 9/11, objects of suspicion. There's been communities that have been torn up by this, and even in New York around 9/11, you remember the controversy about the mosque near the site. Is that something? What's your level of concern about that? And what's your advice in terms of how we navigate past that, because you have so many people who are being ostracized, who have no relationship to the misdeeds that have enraged people?
First of all, I'm against collective judgments. As a Jew, I can say that because we have been victims of collective hate for 2,000 years. And I'm against that. Therefore, we should learn. If Islam becomes a problem, we should learn about Islam. The main thing is learning. And I would bring together teachers of Islam and teachers of the Bible and teachers of the New Testament together for a month, and every day they should study those texts and see what can be done, so the text should not become a source of hate or of anger or of violence to each other. There is in the Quran so much about good things. There's also about not so good things, but that you can find in every religion. Is what we do with it that matters.
How much dialogue have you had with leaders of the Islamic community here in the U.S.?
Not many dialogues, because I tried, when it happened in New York, you remember once I decided, we had a dialogue actually, a public dialogue, and I suggested to have the leaders of Islam to meet and to have actually built a synagogue nearby that place and so forth. Unfortunately, the fanatics are against dialogue. In all religions, fanatics by definition are individuals who speak to themselves, and they don't want to hear another voice, which is wrong. I would like to speak to those people, but they wouldn't listen.
You've spent the better part of your life fighting hatred, fighting fanaticism. You've written about it. You've held conferences on it. And I wanted to read you a question that Regina Kurash sent in via email. Do you find that with all of your writings and the experiences that people have gone through in history, anything has changed in the world? Are you pessimistic or optimistic about the future of the next few generations?
Both.
Well, that's a good answer at the Institute of Politics.
On one hand, look, in truth, I was convinced for a long time that after the event with the capital E that happened to us, Jews, and therefore to the whole world, there could be no other attempt to commit genocide. Could be, because it happened already. And therefore, because it happened, it cannot happen again. And from time to time, there is an attempt. Why? That means people haven't learned. A few years ago, I was invited to address the General Assembly of the United Nations. And I entitled my lecture, Will the World Ever Learn? And came out right away with a very pessimistic conclusion. An answer, no. It will not learn because it hasn't learned. Otherwise, how is one to explain mass murder today? How is one to explain Rwanda? How is one to explain so many evil things? And the force that these evil things carry with. How is it? Haven't learned. Now, look, again, if we could do something, I would organize, let's say, a conference, a summit meeting of the leaders of the world. Again, you have the idea of the president. A summit meeting just for one thing. For 3 days you meet and discuss hatred, and discuss anti-Semitism, and discuss whatever is negative in the human being and human experience, and prevent it from spreading. Forget politics. Just this, hatred. How can we do it? Should they ask themselves? So to prevent the world from going to pieces because of hatred. Racial hatred, religious hatred. So many hatreds, what for?
What about the optimist part?
The optimist part is young people. Look, like you, I live with young people. I've been teaching for more than 40 years, and I love every minute that I spend with them. There you know that things are possible, and they are the answer, because they, in the beginning, when they come in, they are the question, but they become them. The metamorphosis is there. They give the answer. It's their future. It's difficult to say. I'm an old man. And therefore, I love young people. I try to give them everything I have, everything I am, everything I receive. To this day. But I hope I will not give up teaching, sharing, ever.
Well, in my brief experience back here, I can attest to your optimism. I can share your optimism, I should say. As I said to you as we sat backstage, that the young people I've met here are skeptical, but they're not cynical. And they believe they can change the world, and I believe they can. So I share your optimism on that score. Let me ask you about some of the changing events in the world. We've seen the popular movements that have toppled autocracy, people yearning for freedom, people yearning for democracy. But some of those movements also have unleashed old tribal rivalries that you've written about as a source of some of the hatred, some of the fanaticism that we've seen. So the autocratic structure in some of these countries actually suppressed some of this tribalism. So how do you resolve this? Because everyone in this room would say we're on the side of democracy and we're on the side of freedom. But there are these byproducts, and we've seen some of it in the Middle East, and especially in these countries that were sort of contrivances in the first place. It seems as if the good has also ushered in some very troubling byproducts.
I don't know. You think I know? I don't know. All I know is I share your question and the anguish that goes with it, of course. That for good ideals, all of a sudden we realize that those who work for these ideals also commit terrible murder and atrocities. What do you do? How do you separate the two? But look, America, here we come to America after all. We are a great power, the greatest power that we are. And I always believe, always, we are great not because of our military might or because of our rich economy, but because of our moral power. And again, why not? Why shouldn't the president really convene a conference on that? Precisely on that question. What do we do now? And bring in, let's say, 30, 40 intellectuals, professors of morality, professors of sociology, or really people who have something to say. A 3-day conference in the White House and say, look, we have a problem here, a serious problem. What should we do? I tell you, it couldn't not have results.
You, obviously you speak from a place of moral authority, and we look to you for that. But let's focus in on, for example, the issue of Syria, on which you've been very outspoken.
Yeah.
We've lost, 80, 90,000 people in Syria. Terribly destructive conflict. But if you're the United States, on the other side of the equation, the great fear is in empowering the rebels. You don't know who you're empowering. Are you arming Al-Qaeda? Are you arming other extremists who then will inflict more atrocities? Isn't that a legitimate concern?
It is, of course it is. But I'm not the president. I think the president has enough advisors and enough specialists and experts. They should come up with an answer. But there must be, by the way, there should be an answer.
Derek Golan on Twitter sent in this question, and it goes right to the point you were making. Do you believe in the notion that the U.S. government has a moral imperative to actively police injustices around the world?
Absolutely. I think our might should not be only economic or even military, it must be a moral might. For a long, long time, America has been the moral nation in the world, moral leadership in the world. When we fought everything which smacked with dictatorship, we fought it. In the beginning, let's say, against Hitler. Hitler didn't threaten America, he threatened Europe. And nevertheless, we went to war. We should, it's great, it was a just war. And I think even now, morality should be part of our policy.
Interesting question relative to the Arab Spring. You know, there's been a lot of back and forth about whether, given the primacy in the politics of Egypt, of the Muslim Brotherhood, whether the United States somehow should have helped or stood aside rather than encouraging the end of the Mubarak regime. Those who believe that the administration did the right thing would make the moral argument that you shouldn't stand in the way of the democratic aspirations of people. And others would argue that it was only a matter of time anyway, that you can't hold back those tides. But what was your feeling about that? What should the United States have done?
I had mixed feelings about it, really. When I studied it, Mubarak was a dictator, nevertheless. He was a dictator. Now he was arrested by his own people. Who came to succeed him? Democrats? Is there a new democratic regime in Egypt? There is not. So what should we do? In truth, look, if I had the information that you had, and maybe you still have, in the White House, which the president gets it every morning, the intelligence report about whatever happening in the world, I could answer you. I don't have that access.
Yeah.
And therefore it's really difficult to come and give you a clear answer, because each clear answer has the opposite. And on the other hand, right? And on the other hand. But nevertheless, we should be aware. America should certainly intervene.
Yes. Well, I can attest to, as someone who has been there, that you can have a lot of information and the answers aren't always clear. That's one of the challenges of the job and one of the challenges of the world in which we live. Let me ask you about our politics, American politics. There's been a lot of acrimony in the air around our politics today, and people say this is the most divided we've ever been, and this is the most negative our politics has been. I always remind folks that we actually fought a civil war in this country, which seems pretty serious, and we've had difficulties before. But is it your feeling that our politics is meaner or angrier today than it's been in the past? And if so, why?
The past, I don't know. I'm an immigrant here, so I don't know the past, what happened 100 years ago. I don't like...
Well, let's say this, in your lifetime here.
David, I don't like politics. I really don't. Therefore,
Can someone take down these banners?
because I teach philosophy, I teach literature, time to time theology, but not politics. I don't understand it. Seriously, I don't understand it. And therefore I don't like it. It's not my field. Naturally, I feel closer to some than to others, certainly. As a human being, as a person, but nevertheless. But I don't understand politics. I still feel it should be a noble endeavor. To work for the polis, for the city, should be a very noble endeavor. Unfortunately, we see it everywhere, not only in America, that politics also means power, and power corrupts. How do you avoid that? I don't know, but we should at least try to avoid that. And those who work for the polis, those who work for the city, or for the country, or for humanity, should be really so pure, and most of them are, that the question of damage shouldn't even arise.
Agreed, and obviously one of the concerns we have today is there's so much distrust of institutions, all institutions, not just government, but religious institutions, corporate institutions, all institutions. How do you restore faith in institutions?
To deal with human beings, to see the human aspect of everything. Those who stand for election or to run for election, depending on the country where you are in, England or here, should know who are they better, study them. What do they say? Analyze their words, their ideas. And again, always, but the main theme, the leitmotif must be morality, again. Politics without morality will unavoidably bring bad results. There must be, ethos should be a major concern. And I would elect someone for anything, only based on ethos. What is that person's relationship to ethos? And ethos means not for oneself, but for the other, always for the other. I am determined not by myself to myself, but by myself to you, to the other. What do I do for the other? What do I represent to the other? And if you do that, I think you cannot go wrong.
Do you see that as a pervasive ethic in our politics today?
Do people really, in the political debate in America, have you often heard the word ethos? You want votes.
Right. I also but the notion of understanding the other, of empathy, which is a word that became unpopular, in recent years in our political debate, it seems very important. It seems sort of essential to progress.
I agree, certainly.
Do you think that, as a student of society today, do you think there are forces that are making that more difficult in the media?
There are always forces that make it easy, others that make it a bit difficult. We don't live in a society which is composed of the just. It's not a paradise. So we have always had, in the history of this country or any country, that were good, not so good. Some people who believe in ideals, noble ideals, others who believe in the opposite, in evil ideals. But the choice is ours. Ultimately, the choice is ours.
You were very outspoken after the Sandy Hook murders about the need for action. No action came. There was a great debate and no action came. First of all, do you believe this issue of violence is a human rights issue?
It's a moral issue, first of all. Violence is immoral. And then, too many victims were victims of violence in our own country, not only in the world. And I think it should be outlawed. Why not? I don't know, but if you need a special license for the car, but not to wear weapons? I don't understand that. I think there should be a limitation. It's not that people should not shouldn't have the right. The Constitution says they have the right, yes. But something must be done to deserve that. And it's not being done because of political influences. That's wrong.
But you know what the counter argument is, and it's one should be of particular interest to you. There's a sense of fear that an overweening government would, have. I think I'm articulating this point of view the right way. Would have records then of people who have weapons and would confiscate these weapons and would subject people to the whim and the will of the state, i.e., the threat of some fascistic move in the future and so on. You don't have much sympathy for that argument.
No. Look, I lived in France a long time. You cannot go into a shop and buy a gun in France. And don't tell me it's not a democracy. It is a democracy. Don't tell me it's not civilized. It is civilized, after all. And there you cannot simply go to a shop and buy a gun. You need a license for that, which means there is something must happen. When you buy a gun, which can kill, you don't buy a gun to amuse yourself, to kill.
Well, in fairness, there are a lot of people who do buy guns to hunt and for recreational purposes.
You know what Stresemann once said? Stresemann was in Germany, in the Weimar Republic, I think the foreign minister, when they spoke about hunting, he said, I believe, as a Jew, I belong to the hunted, not to the hunters. I would never be a hunter.
What, I've had some discussions. What as a moral leader in the country and someone who feels strongly on this issue.
I'm not a moral leader.
What are you, well, I'm appointing you one. What do you think should be done? Obviously, the Congress is at a standstill. There's a lot of frustration about that. What would you like to do? What do you think others should do?
I told you that. I would like to organize a march to Washington against violence. Simply that. A march We have done it in the past for Soviet Jewry, and we have done it. I was part of that. I would like something like that, a march against violence.
And the purpose of which would be to get Congress to take some action?
Congress to take action, absolutely. Who else will take action? Of course, Congress.
Well, Congress doesn't always take action. I think we've seen that. I would be remiss if I didn't talk a little bit about the situation in the Middle East and Israel. As you mentioned, you were close to Rabin. He was leading a process toward a two-state solution at the time of his death. There is much less optimism today that is in the offing, at least certainly in the near term. First of all, how essential is that to Israel's survival as a Jewish democratic state? And what do you think the path to achieving it is and the consequences of not achieving it?
Well, the question, of course, of giving the Palestinians the right to have their own state. Bibi Netanyahu, after all, who was a right-winger, he accepted that. He said there should be actually a two-state solution, which is perfect, a two-state solution, naturally. It can be done if what Bibi says, that he doesn't have the other side. Who in the other side could speak for all the Palestinians? This is Bibi's argument. It's a good argument. Who could really commit the fate of the Palestinian people, if there is something like that already, signing an agreement? But that should be the answer, certainly. There will be two states. Well, sooner or later, there will be two-state solution.
Now, obviously, it's a very difficult situation, and the failings of the partner on the other side have been well discussed. But you do have a Palestinian Authority that has made some real progress there in terms of quelling violence, as opposed to Hamas. Isn't it in Israel's interest to hold up that authority and make that entity stronger?
But Israel is doing that. Look, I always go every year for Shavuot. I go to Pentecost. I go to Israel, to Jerusalem, and when the holiday ended, actually we went to Shechem, to Nablus. It's an old biblical city. And look, Shechem or Nablus, there is peace there because of the Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian police maintains peace. And Israel is for that. Israel is strengthening the police of the Palestinian Authority. Israel wants nothing better than that, not to have to send its own policemen, but to arm and to help and to train the Palestinian police, which they are doing.
So you feel that the fault for the problems in the peace process rest entirely with the Palestinians?
Entirely. It's a very big word, entirely. But anyway, a major part, certainly. In Israel, you can have very easily to have really a vote. 80% of the Israelis would accept to have a Palestinian state, living in peace side by side with Israel.
Do you think the construction of additional settlements and construction in East Jerusalem have been an impediment to the process?
East Jerusalem is a different story. Settlements is another story. East Jerusalem is after all Jerusalem. There is no frontier between the two, you see that. But for the other places, let there be an agreement between the Palestinians and Israel. All these problems will be solved with one stroke of the pen.
And in terms of Jerusalem, you've expressed yourself on this view. Why don't you articulate that here?
Look, I think Jerusalem, for me, of course, Jerusalem is the eternal city of Israel since the time of David. But I know the sensitivity, and therefore I would say, let a process begin between the Palestinians and the Israelis to have peace and decide to have Jerusalem to wait for 10 years, status quo. In 10 years, if both sides will live in peace, they will be ready to discuss the future of Jerusalem better than now.
Let me ask you an audience question from Rabbi Larry Edwards, who notes that he graduated from the University of Chicago in 1970. I know that you and I share a deep love for the state of Israel and hope for its future. After 46 years since the Six-Day War and of Israel as an occupying power, do you hold out hope for a two-state solution? Or would you now advocate for a single democratic state that extends full citizenship to all those living between the Mediterranean Sea and the Jordan River? Or do you envision some other resolution to the conflict?
Whatever they decide, I accept, clearly.
We all understand the impacts of rockets from Gaza into Israel and past terrorist attacks. Do you feel Israel has met the moral test when it comes to its treatment of Palestinians?
I don't know. I'm serious. Look, I've been in Israel many, many, many times. Occasionally I go to places where the Palestinians live. Does it respond to the test that I would like Israel to obey? Surely not. It cannot be, because whenever there is a tension, when there is a murder of an Israeli somewhere, automatically they feel it. But the Palestinians do not live as an oppressed minority. I spoke to them. They don't. Nevertheless, I should say they have the right of self-determination, absolutely. Let there be peace there, and they will have it.
On this point, I want to read you a question that I got from a friend in Israel, made Aliyah in the 80s and very committed. Has Israel internalized the terrible lessons of the Holocaust, the treatment of the other, the respect of human rights, even in the most challenging, testing times, without weighing the political reality that brought about the conflict or the great security threat that Israel faces? What is your opinion about how a powerful nation can and should treat those among it that are ethnically, religiously, or ideologically linked to their enemies? This is the test of not only democracy and justice, but tolerance, caring for your neighbor, putting yourself in the shoes of the other. How do you learn those lessons and then apply them in your own country when you are the sovereign power?
Let them elect me as Prime Minister, and I will change it.
They did talk about electing you as president, or
I didn't want it.
Okay, well, it's wise. Better to be the philosopher than the king.
Right.
In terms of Iran, and you've been very outspoken on the threat that you feel Iran poses, should the U.S. Join Israel in intervening militarily to try and take out the Iranian missile program?
Look, the enemy there is Ahmadinejad. And I actually would have liked to see Israel do with Ahmadinejad what Israel has done with Eichmann, to kidnap him and bring him to international court in The Hague. Because this guy, Ahmadinejad, has actually admitted publicly, repeatedly, that he believes in destroying the state of Israel, which is a crime against humanity. That's what Israel should have done. The Shin Bet is capable of doing that. One thing I do not want, I don't want to see him in New York when it comes to the United Nations. He should be forbidden to come to the United Nations, because this man is a criminal. He wants to destroy the state of Israel. He said it not once, not 10 times, all the time. Now he travels less. So what will happen? My feeling is that Israel cannot do it without America. Because you cannot conceive, you must not conceive, of a nuclear Iran. We should never permit Iran to become nuclear. And that can be done either Israel, America, or America. Israel alone, I don't know what that.
If it required more than an air attack, if there, the commitment of troops and so on. As an American, would you support that?
I would follow absolutely the president's direction.
Let's talk more generally about moral leadership. What does moral leadership require of citizens today and of each of us?
Again, to see the other not as an enemy, The other is my companion, is my fellow human being, irrespective of color or of economic condition or of religious belief. The other is a human being. And therefore I believe with all my heart that my relationship to the other is what should determine and define my own humanity.
We have a question from Jerry Simon via Facebook, which is, what can, and this is related, what can we, the people of the United States, do to help or bring attention and hopefully change the religious or racially motivated atrocities happening daily in areas throughout the world? What can we do to help the people that are voiceless?
Well, America can. America is still the most powerful nation in the world. And simply wherever an intervention is needed, I would be for such an intervention.
Intervention, unilateral intervention by the United States?
By the United States, for moral reasons. Not for political reasons, for moral reasons.
You know, we started this discussion earlier today. We've just finished 2 wars. There's weariness in the country about war. We're going through a budgetary situation that in which the military budget is being cut back. Are there limits to what America can do militarily to intervene in these situations?
I don't think so. America is still the mightiest nation in the world. It should be the most idealistic nation in the world.
Do you think that the invasion, the war in Iraq, was an idealistic war?
I don't know. I really don't. I did. Nobody asked me.
Virginia Peterson on Facebook asks, my kids aged 9 and 13 have learned about the Holocaust this year in school. My daughter read Night in her 8th grade language arts class. My son read some historical fiction set during the Holocaust in his 4th grade class. And as a family, we all had the opportunity to hear a Holocaust survivor speak about his experiences. This has made for some very interesting family conversations, but the hardest thing for me to respond to was my kids' absolute confidence that this could never happen today. Given that there are many examples of genocide that have occurred and are occurring around the world since the Holocaust, how would you respond to my kids?
There were no genocides, but attempted genocides, which is bad enough. I think that is the worst crime that can be committed by human beings to other human beings. And I think we must intervene, especially America, which is a powerful nation still, which I hope is a morally motivated nation. And wherever such an accusation rises about any country, we should intervene, first politically, diplomatically, or economically, but we cannot be silent.
Do you think that, but in terms of communicating this to your children, what should we communicate to children about this?
That we Americans are still idealistic, and wherever evil triumphs, and that is evil, we denounce it and we intervene.
And do you think we've done that adequately over the last 2 decades or so?
Here and there, not systematically.
I thought this was a great question from Facebook. In Night, there is a passage where the young Wiesel asks an old man something like, "Why do you pray? Do you pray for the answers to your questions?" And the old man replies, "I pray to ask the right questions." And Mr. Child asks, "What are the right questions for this moment in time?"
What else can I do to improve and prevent what history has done already?
And where does that lead one?
First of all, the question itself is a good question.
The question what?
Itself is a very good question. It's already
Yes.
the beginning. And then, of course, sometimes the question is more important than the answer, the fact that we can ask.
And do you think that there is sufficient focus on the larger world? Are we focused? Part of it, we've lived through a difficult economic time. Do you feel people are sufficiently focused on the larger world and as you say, others out there? And how do we promote that ethic?
Are we really involved in other people's affairs? America has done it for many, many decades. Wherever there was a need for intervention, it was the American intervention, the Marshall Plan after the war, and to send armies or weapons to defenseless countries. America has done it. So America is still the greatest nation in the world. I would say even morally, although we are not perfect, very often America has acted for moral reasons more than any other nation in the world.
What are the great moral issues, not relative to other countries, but within our own country? You mentioned one. You thought violence is one. What are the other things that you see that you think that we as a country should be focusing on?
Poverty. Are we really doing enough to eliminate poverty in our nation? Are there still people who are hungry when they go to bed? Can you say with certainty the answer is no? Not sure. And that is shame, brings shame to us. So the first thing really, Marx was not totally an idiot. First thing is really check. Wherever there is poverty, we must eradicate it. We must do something. Eradicate it, of course, democratically, economically, and simply to show that we are a generous people. America is a generous nation.
Is it hard to make that case when people feel like they're struggling in the economy, people who are working hard, not getting ahead? Is it harder to make the case?
Yeah, but we must help them. We must help. I cannot imagine that really a situation in which people would tell me that there are still hungry people in America, that they go to bed hungry. I cannot imagine that. Everything in me is rebelling against that. And there are.
Well, before we finish up, tell me a little bit about what you're doing now. You continue to teach. You've written 57 books. Obviously, you got the hang of it a long time ago, so you have a purpose in doing this. What are your current projects? What are you working on?
Oh, a lot, really. First of all, I work on a volume called My Teachers and My Friends. It's a huge volume. I've been working on it for many, many years. Who were my teachers? Moses and Socrates, and who were they? And who among them were my friends? Posthumously, but nevertheless. Who among the prophets? Is Isaiah my friend? Is Jeremiah my friend? And so forth. That's one thing that I work on a lot. And then, of course, I work about topics, certain topics, which means I want to celebrate language. And to do so, you must also work on silence, the role of silence in language. In music, you cannot imagine music without silence. But about language and philosophy, what did Plato miss when he spoke too much?
And you once told me that you worked part of the day on on fiction and part of the day on nonfiction. Do you continue to do
Same
that?
thing. Look, I have done it since I began writing, really. Studying. First of all, I'm a student. I remained a student to this day. But I've been still studying. And part of it is fiction, and the two should never mix. It's dangerous.
Well, let me just say, I said to these young people this morning that you have distinguished yourself by bearing witness. You've distinguished yourself through your eloquence. You've distinguished yourself through the moral leadership you provided, even if you deny being a moral leader. But in my mind, the most important thing is the example that you've set. And you discussed it at the beginning, but rather than surrendering to anger and despair, you've turned your experiences into a positive force. And in that, you're a wonderful example to every young person in this audience and every person on this planet. So I just want to thank you so much for being with us tonight and for everything that you've done over the course of an extraordinarily impactful lifetime, and for all you're going to do, obviously, in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.